Welcome to the Enhanced Logistics for Operational Efficiency webinar. My name is Adam Pittman. I'm a team lead in the petroleum sector, and I'm joined by Scott Newlis, who is a solution engineer on our natural resources team. We'd like to welcome you to the webinar and let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will also be answering questions at the end of this webinar. So in your control panel, you have a dialogue in which you can ask questions along the way. We encourage you to place your questions in that dialogue box. We have folks that are monitoring that, and we plan to answer as best we can any questions that you put in there. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about our outline for this webinar. First of all, we'd like to show you how to build the foundation to business deliverables with respect to logistics and operational efficiencies. We want to show you the basic tools and components that you need for success. We also want to show you how you can apply those tools in practice to support your daily business scenarios. We want to also show you ways in which you can optimize existing workflows in place using technology to support your daily operations. And then, of course, at the very end, I've already told you that we're going to take any questions that you have and that you input in this chat box and do our best to answer those questions as we move along. So let's start off by talking a little bit about business value and deliverables with respect to logistics and operational efficiency. Some of the expectations that you could take, of course, when you're working with logistics and routing and moving vehicles around the field, you would naturally think that, well, we're going to do this because we're going to optimize our work hours, our schedules, our drive times, dashboard times. Those are some of the things that you're going to hit right out of the box. But Scott, I'll cue you up to join in on this conversation. Are there some of the other things that you also are seeing or hearing from customers with respect to expectations in using this technology?
Hey, Adam. Yeah, absolutely. I think when we start talking about operational efficiency and kind of optimized routing, I think safety is always, at the top of everyone's list. And that could mean reducing windshield time, reducing time on, spin on road, really minimizing travel time at certain times during the day, maybe when there's more traffic on the road. But really outside of that, there's a lot of talk these days around management by exception, pumping by exception, which I think we all can relate to and kind of know that means responding to things that kind of come up throughout the day. And I think at the bottom of the end of the day, right, I think we're all looking at ways to increase the amount of hydrocarbons we ultimately recover, whether that means reducing deferred production, getting wells back online quicker, being able to focus workers on the right places at the right times. I think all of this kind of gets wrapped up into this idea of operational efficiency. And I think an underlying foundation for that is this route optimization.
Yeah, and I don't know, I hear the term, I hear them kind of used together, management by exception, pump by exception. I mean, it seems to be something that we hear quite common, and we have had customers share their stories on that. And it seems to always have the theme of having the right people at the right place at the right time. And I think that probably relates directly, like you said, increasing product delivery and being able to, just by getting those folks at the right place at the right time, keep equipment running and ultimately increase the hydrocarbons that are recovered in this case. Scott, I've also had customers reach out about adjustments they have to make to COVID-19. Have you heard anything about that and any comments you would make on that?
Yeah, I think we're all living in a different time, certainly, over the past couple months, and I think that extends to some level out into the oil field and affects our field workers out there. Whether that's, being able to reduce the amount of time maybe they spend in the field office, maybe it's, routing from people's homes to the locations they need to go to instead of from a centralized field office. Maybe it's even reducing overlap. So really understanding where people are going to be, what times they're going to be there, and making sure everyone's kind of practicing social distancing and all of those guidelines we've heard.
Yeah, I know face-to-face interactions and in-person meetings are probably on hold for everybody right now. So I think it's ultimately important, especially when having fields respond or crews respond in the field, to make sure that they're at the right place at the right time, responding to the right activities. So, I think this is certainly something that could help. So these are, I guess, some of the conversations that Scott and I and our team have with customers on a regular basis, and some of the expectations that you might see when looking at operational efficiency. And really, as a reminder, I mean, this matters to us daily. I mean, even outside of the petroleum space that we're speaking to now, Esri on the whole supports some of the world's largest logistics businesses. There's some great articles and resources that we can make available on our resource page afterward. UPS and their Orion system, and how they rely on the technology that we're showing today to have their delivery trucks move and operate around the world. Digital twin is absolutely something that we hear in the petroleum and natural resources space quite a bit. And I know for a fact some of our global operators have had significant impact in their global supply chain. So these tools can be applied to that. So those are just some of the published case studies that are outside of the petroleum space that our audience may be interested in. But in recent years, we have had petroleum customers get on stage at our Petroleum GIS Users Conference in Houston and share their stories. We've had Marathon Oil in the past, and just by implementing the types of things that we're discussing today, and Scott, the things that you're going to demonstrate here shortly, they were hoping to gain a 20% cut on their operating costs in the Eagle Ford. So that's a big number just by implementing, logistics and improving the way that their trucks and field crews move around and report and respond to activities. That's a big cost savings. We also had Apache up, and they were sharing, and I think they were presenting on the pump by exception scenario as well. And here's a couple quotes that are listed here, where Xavier Burney of Apache said, we want to make sure that our folks are in the field and they're focused on the most important things. And so that's responding. I don't know if you can see the screenshot there, the red dots, making sure that people are responding to those red dots. Scott, is there anything else that you would add to this particular point?
Yeah, I'd say it really extends beyond only operators, right? I think, a lot of times we focus on operators and obviously they have wells and facilities that they need to maintain. But it's also, around service providers and companies that contract with operators for various things. A lot of times they have fleets and vehicles and resources that need to go to certain places, be there at certain times and deliver certain amounts of products. So I think this idea of operational efficiencies and being able to create optimized routes really as a foundation for how a lot of companies in our space operate.
Yeah, and one key point, I know, Scott, you're going to demonstrate this and show some examples a little bit later, but I do, one point that when you look at the customer screenshots here, all of them are kind of focused on ROI, I believe. You've got dashboards that are showing charts and graphs and, how people are performing in the field, who's on site, who's traveling, what kind of time efficiencies are we gaining? So I think that's a really important part, not only implementing the technology to actually do the work, but being able to deliver on those key performance indicators and communicate to leadership that this technology can help and can make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that common operating picture and that situational awareness, helps people not only in the field but back in the office really respond to what's occurring out there in the field, being able to kind of plan or track plan versus actuals, and really reevaluate kind of how their operations are unfolding in real time.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess let's take a little bit of a shift now that we've kind of positioned this a little bit and maybe level set. Let's talk about some of the requirements for success. You know, like in the specific examples that we just discussed, what technology and components were used to make that a reality? So, you know, I think especially for today, we want to tier this. You know, we want to do kind of a crawl, walk, run scenario, if you will. But you know, these are the things that we're using in today's demonstration, and certainly what would have been used in the examples of Marathon and Apache that we just covered, and even with UPS. But we're going to be using desktop software, right? We're going to be using Network Analyst Extension, which is an extension that many people already have in place. We're going to be using the Network Analyst extension within the enterprise environment, and we'll explain why a little bit later. For a data source, we're using StreetMap Premium data. We're using Navigator for ArcGIS, and you know, I think that's an important point. You know, you certainly, if you're going to be generating routes and having people follow a workflow throughout the day, you need to have a safe, hands-free, voice-navigated way to do that. Many people have access to Navigator now. And that's certainly a ready-to-use application I would position for that. And I do not want to brush over the skill and knowledge that it takes to pull this together. I think, Scott, you're going to get into the demo here in just a second, but I think people will see it. You know, a GIS professional is going to be involved in putting this together, making these tools available and accessible, and putting them to work so that other folks in the organization can leverage. I think that's the key component here. So we do want to focus on skill and knowledge, and we'll circle back to that when we answer questions towards the end. So Scott, I guess at this point I will transition to your screen. You ready to take over and kind of walk through some of the demonstrations on the technology?
Yeah, let's jump into it. All right, so we're going to keep this pretty conversational, but as Adam just mentioned, we're going to start kind of at the crawl phase, right? What are some of the underlying topics and concepts when it comes to route optimization and logistics within kind of ArcGIS and Esri? So what we're looking at here is ArcGIS Pro, our desktop application, and we've got a map pulled up here of the Permian Basin out here in West Texas, and we've got some of our operational layers thrown on this map. So we can see kind of our leasehold. If we were an operator, maybe we see some of our field offices here. And if we zoom in, we can see, you know, some of our wells and facilities. So just very basically, right, the first thing we want to do is really figure out and understand how do we route from point A to point B. That's kind of the foundational, you know, network analysis workflow that a lot of people start with. So within ArcGIS Pro here on our analysis tab, we have our network analysis toolbox. If I expand this, we can see some of the tool sets that we have available for us to use here. And a lot of these network analysis tools rely on an underlying network data set. Give it just another second here, maybe while this pulls up. And this network analysis or this network data set is really a connected you know, data set of all of our road features that we can traverse and route on. So for some reason, this is having a few issues pulling up here, but that's fine. What I'm going to do here is just quickly zoom in to this area while that thing finishes pulling up, and we can see, you know, we've got a lot of facilities out here, both on our leasehold, and maybe we've got some offset facilities and wells here as well. When we generate some of these routes, the direction and the path that these routes take, there it goes, will ultimately depend on the road features and that underlying network data set that we have out here. So what I'm going to do is pick from one of our kind of predefined network analysis workflows. I'm just going to pick the routing workflow. And this tool is using the network analysis web service coming from ArcGIS Online. So that delivers, you know, a fully routable road network. You don't have to maintain or create any road data. It's all just kind of ready to go out of the box. And that lines up very well with some of these road features that we see here on the base map. So a lot of these road features that we see are going to be included in this network analysis layer that we're making, and it's usually not this not this slow, but I'm working from home, so we have maybe some lag there. All right, now we've got that pulled up. What we want to do is basically drop in some stops, basically a starting and stopping point that this route is going to create. So I'm going to come over here to my create features tool, and I'm just going to simply place a few new stops from our field office. What I'm going to do is generate a route from our field office down to a well that maybe our supervisor or one of our workers needs to visit. And this can be very interactive, or you can run kind of a geoprocessing tool to automate some of this as well. So I'm just going to drop our first stop in here at our field office, and then what I'm going to do is actually use our locate option to come in here and search for that well that I'm going to route to. This is just using kind of our out-of-the-box ArcGIS geocoder, but what I can do is also search for a layer in my map. Instead of one of those predefined addresses here, I'm going to go back to my previous extent, and we'll just zoom into this guy here. So there's my well. We'll just quickly zoom into him. We can see that was the spot we were just looking at. And I'm going to drop my kind of destination point here at the wellhead. So if I zoom back out, I've got kind of my starting point over here at the field office, my new stopping point at that well that I just defined. And when we create that network analysis layer, we get this contextual network analysis tab here that allows us to configure some additional settings for the route that we're going to run. So we can do things like change the travel mode. We can define the sequence that the route's going to take. In this case, it's just 2 stops, so that's not necessarily relevant. But if we add more stops, we can configure some additional travel settings. What I'll go ahead and do is just run this analysis. And again, what this is doing is it's taking that underlying network data set coming from ArcGIS Online, all of those ready-to-use roads, and it's just finding the best location, the best path between those 2 points. So if I go back to my map tab here and zoom in, we can see that route kind of traverses maybe some county roads, some state highways out here. And then right when we get to our wellhead here, what it's doing is it's actually taking this lease road that's not on our acreage and kind of bringing us in the back door here. And it might be doing that for a few reasons, right? Maybe this new lease road that goes to that well pad hasn't been added to our map, or it hasn't been added to that underlying road data set. But we can kind of visualize that here if we turn on our lease roads that we as a company maintain, right? We can see we've got this red road that kind of comes right in here, and it goes directly to this well pad. And we can verify this by looking at the imagery. Maybe this is a newly constructed well pad, and this road just hasn't been added to that data set. So it's really just taking it as close as we can get, on that existing road network. And in some cases that'll work, but a lot of the times out here in West Texas or in some of these rural operating areas, there's a lot of roads, a lot of private roads that operators own and maintain that aren't available in some of these commercial road data sets. So Adam, does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, in essence, what you did is you're in ArcGIS Pro with the Network Analyst extension right now. You were able to use those tools and fire against the ArcGIS Online routing mechanism, right? So, I mean, anyone who had a data set and a connection to ArcGIS Online and Pro could do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then the next step is, I think you gave the introduction, next step's incorporating those private roads, right?
Right. So most of the operators, that are operating out here, they have that network of private lease roads, and we can see kind of all of our red roads here in our acreage that represent roads that we own or maintain. And a lot of these times, like I said, these roads aren't in that kind of out of the box, ready to go network data set. But using some of our other tools and capabilities, we can kind of merge the data that we have with the data that we are provided to with our public road network. And that a lot of times happens through this product that we have called StreetMap Premium. So StreetMap Premium is a data set, a very comprehensive data set of roads and related tools to help you manage these roads and perform routing and network analysis on. And this is just an overview of some of the roads. I've brought in, I think, our North America data set here. And at this high level, we're looking at just our network data set that's symbolized by some kind of historical traffic flow. But if I zoom in, we can actually see all of the individual road features that are included with StreetMap Premium. And I can turn that on here. All of these green lines really represent all of the road features that get included with StreetMap Premium. And these, depending on your area of interest, your geography that you have, there could be millions and millions of road features. And this really provides a great foundational starting point if you don't have any road data, that you have accessible within your organization outside of maybe your private lease roads. This gives you kind of a good foundational point for starting with some of these routing workflows.
And I would guess, Scott, that more importantly, I mean, not only are you getting the geometries of the road, but all of the attribution and all of the network connectivity and logic behind the scene that makes the logistics stuff happen is built into this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the benefits of StreetMap Premium is you have this ability to add in your custom road data set and kind of integrate it with that StreetMap Premium data set as well. So still here out in the Permian, just a little further west, kind of outside of Pecos, we've got another set of acreage or another area of acreage. And here we've got all of our red lease roads, right? If I toggle on all of those StreetMap Premium roads, we'll see, wrong layer, we'll see, there's pretty good coverage for the most part. We've got a lot of these roads already accounted for within the StreetMap Premium data set, but there are some lease roads and facilities that aren't part of that data set. And what we can do using a couple of the automation tools and ArcGIS Pro tasks that come along with your StreetMap Premium license, there's actually workflows for going through and assessing the data that you already have, preparing it to merge with that StreetMap Premium data, workflows and tools for removing duplicate road segments and fixing geometry issues and ensuring connectivity. So this is kind of another benefit of having that StreetMap Premium data set, is getting all of these tools and workflows and tasks that kind of help you manage the process of integrating your two data sets. And I'm not going to spend time doing that right now, but we can take a look at what the output might look like. So once I've run some of those tools and we've taken our custom roads and we've added them to our StreetMap Premium data set, we can now see that for the most part, we have all of our roads accounted for. And really how these two layers come together is through that network data set. So we can have multiple input layers kind of participating in this network data set here, and that allows us to have that seamless navigation and routing from any point on our public StreetMap Premium road network all the way to our kind of private self-maintained road network that we have here. And really what this allows us to do, if we take a look at this other map, is get more accurate, more precise results. So if we take that same workflow that we just looked at, those two starting and stopping points, and we run that tool now using, instead of the underlying ArcGIS data set, ArcGIS Online data set, we now use our routing network data set that we get with StreetMap Premium, and we rerun that analysis, we can see how that route changes. So instead of coming up here, going off lease, kind of to this backdoor road here, what it does is it properly routes just like we would expect it to on lease onto that brand new lease road that we've built that leads directly to that well pad. So this gets all of your drivers, all of your field personnel to the location that they need to go without kind of guessing, how close am I going to be? Am I going to have to figure out, the last, 10 or 5% once I get to where that original route lets me off? This will take us directly to where we need to go with very kind of highly accurate and precise results.
Yep. So this is the most simple part of it, and I'm guessing the next transition would be in how do you handle mass, right?
Absolutely. So if we scale this problem out, right, we instead of just one driver with one stop, a lot of us are really tasked with trying to figure out how do we take our entire fleet, our entire field staff, and generate optimized routes for all of them that go to all the locations they need to visit on a daily or weekly basis. And we kind of illustrate that here by toggling on this layer. So now we have all these red dots that represent wells, maybe they need to be serviced for a maintenance reason, maybe they need to be inspected, but they need to be visited by one of our field workers. And it may be, a specialty field worker, it may be the same person that goes there all the time, but we have a kind of more robust tool set to help us deal with kind of this scaled out problem. If I open my geoprocessing tab here, we've got a tool called the Solve Vehicle Routing Problem, and this is a tool available in the Network Analyst tool set. And this tool allows us to create or model very detailed routing and transportation scenarios. And there's a ton of parameters here. I'm not going to cover all of them. Instead, I'm just going to cover some of the basic kind of required tools or input data sets that we need to make this tool work. So the first input data set is going to be our orders, and these orders really represent just all of the locations that need to be visited. So if I open up my orders feature class here, there's a set schema that VRP tool works off of. And what I've done is I've just appended all of our features from our inspection wells feature class into our orders feature class. And there's additional parameters here that allow us to model, how much time it takes to complete that particular activity, if there's any time windows that location needs to be visited, and so on and so forth. So that orders layer is that first kind of parameter that we need that represents all the stops that need to be visited. So I can come in here and select that. Our second parameter is our depots. Our depots represent kind of our starting or stopping points. And in this case, we're looking at our field offices, right? So in a typical day, we might have workers drive to our field office, and then from there, they'll get their assignments to go out to their respective locations. Same idea for our depots. We've got a set schema that we can load our features into, and this will determine where our routes start and stop for the day. So I'm just going to go ahead and load our depots in here, and then our third and kind of final parameter is information about our routes. So our routes is essentially just a table data set, tabular data set, and this table contains information about each driver, the route name, where they're starting, where they're stopping, what their maybe start or stop times are, if there's any restrictions on the total number of stops they can visit, what their total route time is going to be. All of these are different parameters that can be accounted for within this tool. So if I come in here and just source that last input, we've got here our offices, and then our final input here is going to be just that underlying network data set that we're going to route on. And that's just going to be that combined StreetMap Premium data set with our own private lease roads. There's a variety of other parameters that we can specify here, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and accept the defaults. And when we run this tool, we're going to get some output data sets. And this will actually run pretty quickly, depending on the total number of orders and routes that we're generating. But we can kind of see here, it's kind of a hard to see color, but if I maybe change this color real quick, we can see some of our routes that got generated here. Let me update this from this pink color. Let's do maybe a green or something like that. All right, and that should let us see that. There we go. All right, so we can see routes got generated to visit all of the stops here. And depending on the specifications of each route, we have a starting and stopping point from all of our field offices. So now we have kind of this optimized order of stops that got generated by that solver. And then we also got our routes that visit each stop in that optimized sequence.
So Scott, you covered a lot of things. I mean, you went through everything it takes to make that happen, right? I mean, which is there's steps and process and tools and all kinds of things that we need to make that reality. And I think you just exposed that. And I guess, what is the next step for making this more accessible? I guess you could say for everyday folks to be able to do this.
Yeah, I'd say right now this is a very GIS heavy workflow, right? And I think ultimately, if we put this kind of workflow into production, we don't want to necessarily have to rely as much on someone that has experience with these tools and these kind of very GIS heavy processes. So what we can do is really offload a lot of the stuff to something like the web, where we can call these tools through maybe a configurable web app or a more simplified interface that allows someone like a scheduler or something to kind of do the same type of analysis without necessarily needing all of that same kind of knowledge of the ArcGIS Pro desktop tool here. And how we would do that is by executing that tool that we just ran and sharing that tool as a web service. So here in my geoprocessing history, I've got that solve vehicle routing problem tool that I just ran. And here we've got this option to share this tool as a web tool. And when we do that, it's going to allow us to configure this web tool or this geoprocessing service that we end up publishing to be used for the web. And we're doing this because we're up here, we're connected to our enterprise portal, and we're able to publish our web services and publish geoprocessing services to our ArcGIS server component. And I think we'll get into kind of how this all looks from maybe an end user perspective after we kind of wrap this up, this first portion up, and do a little summary. How's that sound, Adam?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we can transition back to the slides for a recap of what you just showed. I mean, I think, Scott, this is the heavy portion of our webcast for today. I mean, what you just covered was, I mean, exactly what any of the folks on the call right now would have to use to go through and solve, you know, some logistics vehicle routing scenarios. I mean, that's what it takes. But I think the really important part is that, you know, you used ArcGIS Pro, used Network Analyst, you brought in the StreetMap Premium custom roads, which we'll talk a little bit more about, because I do see some questions already put in by some of the viewers today. But I think the important transition that we can make is, I mean, you absolutely covered what a GIS professional would do. I think that next step in supporting daily business operations is to make this usable and simple in a way that a scheduler or anyone outside of that GIS profession could actually execute and leverage those capabilities. So that'll be our transition point here in just a sec, but I do see quite a bit of questions that have been posted about StreetMap Premium specifically. So I think this is a perfect time to kind of snake this in and actually talk a little bit more about StreetMap Premium, and this will answer some of the questions that are out there now. Scott showed StreetMap Premium. Just that is as a ready-to-use data product that you can purchase. Esri partners with here, the commercial data provider, to supply that. It uses our vector tiling scheme, so the maps look beautiful and crisp. You have a daytime map, a nighttime map. They're ready to use. You don't have to worry about cartography. It's an authoritative street data set. It's updated quarterly by here, and you actually get pushed the updates every quarter. You also get to choose the geography at which you work. So if you are just operating in a single state, let's say in the United States, you could buy that state. You can buy all of the United States. You can buy all of North America. You can buy Europe, Middle East. You choose the geography at which you need to operate and license that data. Another important factor is that it's secured. So you can secure, like Scott was showing, behind the firewall. So when you merge in your custom roads following the task list and workflows that Scott showed, that's secured and private behind your firewall. And of course, when you deploy the StreetMap Premium, it looks great within ArcGIS Pro, just like Scott demonstrated a moment ago. But here in a little bit, he's actually going to show that same data set being deployed on a mobile device, and it looks and acts exactly the same. So that's just a real quick, I guess, highlight point for StreetMap Premium. Did I leave anything off with respect to StreetMap Premium, Scott?
I don't think so. I think you covered it.
Okay. So let's move on to our next topic, which isn't quite as heavy and technical as what you just covered, but this does transition and maybe how we can support and help the GIS professionals support their business operations and kind of move those workflows that are very heavy within the GIS professional realm and move these into something like a browser or a task that can be executed through a browser. So taking those next steps, we certainly hear a lot, and a lot of the questions that our team gets asked regularly, I would say almost on a weekly basis, is how do we help our customers transition what Scott just did into supporting something like a daily or weekly workflow that has automation incorporated into it. It certainly enhances the usability, so we're widening the base of folks that could actually perform those tasks. In order to do that, we have to leverage the web. And that's what Scott ended with. He published and he did all that work as a GIS professional in that first demonstration. And I think this next component is we want to move this to a web task and show how you can do that. And another important part is that when we do these things, we need to be able to account. We need to be able to show the key performance indicators and report on how these tools and functions are making an impact to support the business. So it's like those screenshots we saw with the Marathon and Apache scenario: charts, graphs, metrics, numbers. How is this making an impact? So this is the transition point, Scott. I think we can now take it back over to your screen where you can demonstrate how we support these daily workflows and how we bring enterprise and the web into this. So you ready to take it over and transition to your screen?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so where I ended last time, like Adam just mentioned, was publishing that geoprocessing service from ArcGIS Pro. And once that process finishes, this is really what we get. So what I'm looking at now is ArcGIS Server Manager. I'm just logged into a browser here, and I'm able to see that geoprocessing service that just got published. And really the reason I'm showing you this interface is just to highlight kind of where this thing is being stored. Because ultimately what we're going to do is consume this through our portal or ArcGIS Online organization. And we can do that through something like a basic web application. So what I've essentially done is taken that published web tool, that geoprocessing service. I've created a web app using something like Web App Builder. I've added a geoprocessing widget into my web app, and I've simply referenced that geoprocessing service that we just published that's being stored in our ArcGIS server. What this allows me to do is now completely replicate that same workflow that we just did within Pro at the desktop level here within a web app. So I've got that same web map pulled up here. I can see my field offices. I can see all of my order locations or all of my my wells, my inspections, my maintenance activities. And I'm simply just going to browse to the inputs within our widget here, much like I did within that geoprocessing tool within Pro. So these input data layers, they can come from this web map like I've got here. It could be a file that we just upload, maybe from our local machine or from our shared network drive. It could even be a URL or something like that that we're sourcing from the web. So there's a variety of ways that we can kind of load these data layers in here. We see a lot of the same parameters that we saw within that VRP tool. I'm just going to set the default date here. We'll say this morning we're going to generate routes that start at 7:30 a.m. And that scheduler or that business analyst that's using this web app can have full control over how all these parameters are set, and we can choose to expose, the parameters that we want to. So this could be as kind of simple or as complex as we need it to be. Here's any travel restrictions that we can have control over, right? So if I know that for this case, we want to avoid private roads, or we're going to be driving a truck, or whatever those parameters might be, we can set those kind of accordingly on here. And then all we're going to do is maybe choose to output some route data, and we're going to give this a name. So this is going to be my optimized routes that I'm generating. And when I run this tool, a feature service is actually going to be created that's stored within my portal in my content, and it's going to contain all of the same output data sets that we saw from that Pro tool. So these are just some warning messages that I'm getting here. But when this tool finishes, just here in a few seconds, we'll see the routes that get generated. and we'll see all of the stops as well.
So
So this looks
that's a lot easier than what you just did in Pro.
a lot easier. Just a few clicks of the button, and we've got basically the same output here. And we can see it looks pretty similar, if not identical, to that same output we got in the desktop, right? So we're using the same underlying network data set, that StreetMap Premium, mixed with our custom lease roads. We're just offloading the processing from the desktop tier up to that server tier, and we're able to do this through a web app. So I didn't really spend any time making this look pretty or functional or anything like that. But that really just underscores kind of the level of ease that you can use or create, with these tools. And this is just more of a configurable approach, right? Another approach might be maybe a little bit more of a customized approach. And one of my colleagues here created this kind of prettier looking app for us using Experience Builder. And this app here allows us to just have a little bit more of a clean look. We've got here required parameters, so we've kind of cleaned up how our parameters are presented to us. We still have full control over setting all these parameters, but maybe we just want to expose the things that are, just required here for the tool to run. And then we're ready to go. We can solve that route by calling that same geoprocessing tool on the back end. But maybe we want to also take it a step further and add a level of automation in here. That could occur, several different ways. It might be, something as simple as sending out an email to all of the drivers with their route that got generated here by this tool. And maybe we click a button that says, solve routes and send email. The output of that, what the drivers see might look something like this. So if I switch over to my tablet here, let's pretend that process was executed. I've got an email now as a driver out in the field that has information about my daily work. So here for today, 6/16, I've got a nice view, kind of this email template that shows all of my stops, what I'm going to be doing at each stop, the optimized sequence that these are ordered in. And then most importantly, I've got this nifty little link that I can click on here. That's actually going to take me to our navigator application for some routing and navigation. And what happened was when I clicked that link, right, it's got a URL scheme in there that actually opened up the navigator application on my device, and it passed that route that was created through to the map. So I've got all of my optimized stops on there. And now within Navigator, I'm able to see an overview of my route for the day. So I can see exactly how long that's going to take, what my distance traveled is, my estimated time of completion. I can even dive down into my turn-by-turn directions here. And all of this is going to be using that underlying network data set and all of our road features. Adam, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Are you ready to transition over to slides to kind of recap everything that you just showed?
Before I want to do that, let's just take one look at how some of these metrics might look like, right?
Oh, yeah, dashboards, the important part.
So back in the office, I think it's important for our supervisors, our foremen, or really whoever needs to see this information to be able to get kind of a common operating picture of what's going on out in the field. And if I refresh this real quick, we'll get the latest updates. So for this particular dashboard, we're able to see a couple of different things. We're able to see all of our field personnel, all of our routes that have been generated, how many stops each driver has. We're able to see some overarching metrics for all of our routes that got generated. So total scheduled route times, distances traveled, travel times, and then some averages, stops per minute, minutes per stop, whatever it might be. And then over here on the map, we see a good representation of not only our stops and our routes, but also the real-time locations of all of our drivers. And we could be pulling that information from a telematics feed, GPS on our vehicles, or even just location tracking from our drivers. So I'm able to not only see where they're at in relation to their route and their stops, but I'm also able to kind of track their activity throughout the day and see what their progress is. So if I select a driver, let's pick Dal here, I can actually zoom in to his route on the map here. I see all of his stops. If I zoom in a little further, I can even see them kind of numbered here. And I can see his scheduled activities for the day, and I can see the order that he actually completed activities in. And I can kind of do a comparison. So I can see his first stop for the day. You know, he's supposed to arrive at 7:49 or depart at 7:49. He actually completed it a few minutes early. And so I'm able to track kind of all of these things throughout the day and really get a good idea of where my driver is in relation to where they're supposed to be, and really compare kind of this planned schedule against the actual. And this is all being done in just a configurable dashboard, just using some of the output information that we got from our VRP tool, and then some location data coming in from the field.
Nice. I think that's the valuable part that helps demonstrate and prove the business value that this type of technology can do when implemented correctly and support the business. All right, well, Scott, you ready to transition over to, I guess, our recap and then maybe start answering some questions here shortly?
Sounds good.
All right, well, let's transition back to the PowerPoint. I guess in recap, and I'm seeing a lot of good questions, Scott, we're gonna have to come back to on what you just showed. Seems like a lot of folks are interested in the web component side of what you just did. So we'll certainly need to come back to that. But what you just did was you just leveraged web services. I think one neat little thing that you did that really adds value, and we'll certainly come back and talk about this more in just a bit, was that automation component in the email. And you know, we have some scripts that we're going to share with everyone through a GitHub site, where it helps them, you know, or at least shows them some samples on how they can apply that automation into that task, so that it kicks out the email and they get the same type of visualization that you had. And really, what I'm guessing what you were doing, you were just passing a URL scheme in that email, and when that person clicks on it, if they've got Navigator going, and they're, especially if they're on their phone, it just opens Navigator and gets them on their way. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yep. So, I mean, I think that those are little things like that, or I think what helps to improve the usability. Having a much simpler way to execute what just quite frankly is a pretty complex series of tasks on the network and analytics side on the back end, providing it in a more usable way to support daily workflows and to incorporate that automation, I think makes this far more approachable for everybody. And then on top of that, I think what management and folks that are really watching dollars and efficiencies, they really want to see the reporting and visualization side of that. So how are we measuring our performance, and is this really working? So I think the dashboards that you showed at the end are kind of a must-have, especially if you want to demonstrate any kind of value. Anything that you would add on that recap, Scott?
No, I think we're ready to see what some next steps are and maybe get into some questions.
All right, yeah. So let's get into some questions, and I guess before we do that, Scott and I and the folks supporting us, we want to support your success, and we hope that whenever we put together these webinars, that we help you be successful with this. And so we're taking a little bit different approach today, and we've stood up a few resources that we're going to share with everybody. So everyone that registered for this webinar is going to get a follow-up email. First of all, we put together kind of a resource page. We actually used our own tech. We used ArcGIS Hub to stand up a resource page, and you're seeing a screenshot of what that looks like here on the right. By next week, my screen keeps popping back. By next week, we should have a recording of this entire webcast available on Esri's YouTube channel. So our intention is to reply back to everyone that registered and provide you with these resources, including a link of this recording. So if you had folks in your organization that couldn't make it today, or time zones were off, you certainly can share the recording with everyone so that you can distribute this across the organization. Scott, I think you and I are on the hook to do a blog post for this. So we're going to be writing a blog post and sharing that here pretty soon. That kind of walks through some of the things that we showed. and has some embeds in there that you can, resources and references you can get to. We also recognize that what Scott showed in the beginning was quite a bit, and it's something that we would love to develop a learning pathway for. So how to use network analysts, how to publish those tools to the web, and what kind of best practices should you follow, and how do we go about implementing all of these things. So there's a learning pathway that we can put together there. We're putting together a GitHub site. So on that GitHub site, we plan to put all the things that Scott showed today in the way of the automation scripts and any of the code base. I see a few questions in this box, in the chat box here, regarding Experience Builder, Scott. So we've got people that are interested in that, and I think that GitHub site would be a great spot. As soon as we can get all that published up, that'll also be part of the follow-up. The last two items before we get to the questions. Anybody that wants, either needs the software, or they need the data, or they need help. Maybe it's in the way of Esri professional services to kind of provide consultation or jumpstart. We have a kind of a getting started software, data, professional services package that we can support you with. So please reach out to Scott or me, or your account manager, and they can certainly help you get going there. Lastly, you're going to receive a survey. Scott and I would love to get your feedback on what you thought of this. Was it helpful? What kind of things can we do to improve these, the frequency of them, whether we do them at all? We'd love to receive your feedback to help us get better. So Scott, I think now you can take yourself off mute if you're on mute, but we've got quite a bit of questions here, and I'm going to say that they are directed a lot towards you. So I think I'm just going to go straight to the. I'm going to kind of vet these real quick, Scott. Make sure I don't ask you too many crazy questions. But a lot of folks have asked about the logic part, the algorithms on the tracking. So some good questions here. I'll just kind of go back towards the top and start with some of the questions that were asked earlier on. Someone asked, what if they don't have network routes or a network road data set? Is any of this applicable? I mean, they have to have a network analyst or network routable data set, correct? That's the answer to that.
Yeah, and I think we briefly touched on it a little bit. Everyone that's using Esri Tech has the ability to use kind of that out of the box ArcGIS Online network analysis service in a lot of these network analysis tools. But if you need kind of that higher accuracy, higher precision data set, I think StreetMap Premium is honestly a great way to go for adding and bringing in that data, that road data that you don't necessarily have to maintain, right? It's either get something like that or go about digitizing all the roads, and I don't think anyone necessarily has a lot of time or willpower to do that. So I think StreetMap Premium, it's a great kind of starting point. It has that ability to let you add in your own custom roads if that's what you want to do too, or you can just kind of use it out of the box, ready to go as an alternative to that ArcGIS Online routing data set.
Scott, I know people in the past have asked questions about the OpenStreetMap. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you could use OpenStreetMap, but is it probably just from a cost perspective? Then you're putting a lot on someone's time to digitize and kind of mess with that OpenStreetMap source. Do you have any more information on that?
Sure. Yeah. So OpenStreetMap is honestly, it's a great resource. It's free, obviously. It's really crowdsourced, so you have a lot of people contributing, and it's got good coverage, kind of global coverage. And really, our network analyst tools are agnostic as far as the road data that gets fed into them, right? It really just has to do with where you're at, I think, and there's kind of a lot of factors that depend kind of what data set you want to use. Maybe it's your operating area, maybe bit frequency you're looking for, maybe it's the level of detail needed, and just some of the initial kind of evaluations I've seen. StreetMap Premium provides a lot of good coverage in rural areas, maybe that OpenStreetMap doesn't necessarily have as detailed of coverage. StreetMap Premium provides those regularly scheduled kind of quarterly updates. I think one of the biggest benefits of StreetMap Premium is that rich kind of attribution of all the road data. So that really lets you do kind of very highly detailed routing scenarios, and with all those attributes, you can kind of mix and match what scenarios you're doing, and really model all the different travel restrictions and parameters that kind of go into a lot of these workflows.
Yep. Moving on to some of the other questions here, because I know we've got about 5 minutes left. I see a comment referencing shipping, like, hey, we'd like to use this technology and solution for shipping. Yes, Scott and I focused today primarily on vehicles, but I would love for you to reach out to me regarding shipping, because I think it's applicable. Of course, ships don't necessarily adhere to roads, but I think there's certainly some application to this in the world of shipping as well, especially with the supply chain. So there's a question, Scott, I think I can take this one pretty quickly. There's a question about how often StreetMap Premium is updated. This may have come in before we had that slide, but StreetMap Premium is updated quarterly. And so you can update the commercial road base quarterly with that. And then of course with the custom roads, you can update your custom roads at will. Let's see. Here's a pretty technical question, Scott. Get ready for this one. Do the schemas of the tables have to match a certain set for the solve vehicle routing problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we didn't necessarily have a lot of time to dive deep into, but that solve vehicle routing problem tool set, those input layers, the data it's looking for and that it needs to execute really is kind of a set schema. But there's tools that allow you to append your existing data into it. You can kind of map fields to make sure if you've got a name in this field in your data set, it needs to go to this corresponding field in that vehicle, that solve vehicle routing problem tool set. So there's a lot of kind of built-in just geoprocessing and data management tools that help you kind of rectify or reconcile the differences between the data that you have and the data that it requires to run. But it has that set schema because it allows it to do all of those advanced kind of robust solves. So that's another kind of benefit of having that StreetMap Premium data set too, right? Is it has a lot of those same attributions kind of between the two, and you can kind of map the data quicker as opposed to maybe bringing in an external data set.
Awesome. There's a few questions, Scott, around Navigator. One, and there's actually a couple around the URL schema that you used. Can you tell us a little bit about that URL schema that you embed within the Navigator email that you did? How does that work? Like, do you have to publish something to the server, or is it just referencing something? How does all that work? Can you give us a quick rundown?
Yep, great question. So Navigator works by consuming what we call a mobile map package. That mobile map package is shared to either your ArcGIS Online organization, your portal, or it's sideloaded onto the device. So that mobile map package contains all of the road data. It contains those operational layers, our leases or wells, anything else that you want to see in that map. When we called it from that email, what we did was we passed a route item to that Navigator map, that mobile map package. So within that URL, there's a set schema that we use that called the specific item ID for the mobile map package that we wanted to use. And then it also called the item ID for the route layer that got generated from the BRP output. And so we just passed those two things as parameters. We had Navigator installed on our device. So when we clicked that link, it just opened up the right map and then overlaid the correct route onto it.
All right. And if any of you have questions further about that, please reach out. And I think we'll take our last question. We started a minute late. We're now a minute over, but this will be our last question. And it again involves Navigator. And Scott, they're asking about custom routes. So if we have custom routes or custom roads, can you view those routes in Navigator? And the answer is absolutely yes. Those get pushed out to Navigator, and not only Navigator, but every other source that's using that data. So we've got a few questions that we still couldn't get to, but we will follow up with everybody. We have all the questions and who submitted them. We'll follow up, and I believe also we'll provide a post to all the questions that were answered. But I want to thank you very much for joining Scott and I today in the webinar. As a reminder, there's a survey that you should get as soon as this ends. If you please contribute to that survey, we would greatly appreciate any feedback or constructive advice you have on how to make these more impactful for you. We also will be following up with each of you on the recording of this webinar and all the questions and resources that Scott and I mentioned. And on behalf of the entire Natural Resources team, we certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us. And Scott, I guess that's it. We're signing off. You ready to end it?
Yep, really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.